This is Dateline Wyoming, produced in the studios of WyoRadio. Dateline Wyoming is a weekly news feature highlighting community issues and events that shape our lives here in Southwest Wyoming. In-depth analysis and interviews with the people behind the headlines. Presented Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. Views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WyoRadio ownership, management, or those of our sponsors. Time will be made available for responsible dissenting opinion. And now, Dateline Wyoming. This is your host for Dateline Wyoming, Tom Ellis. When we measure the quality of life in a community, one of the important factors is the services available for those with a disadvantaged lifestyle. One of those service providers locally is NOWCAP. Our guest on Dateline today is Lloyd, Rock Springs NOWCAP Southwest Wyoming Community Director. Roy, welcome to Dateline Wyoming.
Thank you, Thomas. Great to be here again.
Let's talk just a little bit about NOWCAP. What is NOWCAP and what are its origins?
NOWCAP Services is based out of an organization in Worland, Wyoming that's actually been in Wyoming for over 40 years. The NOWCAP acronym actually stands for Northwest Community Action Programs. And NOWCAP is actually a series of about 7 to 8 different federally funded nonprofit programs throughout the state of Wyoming and actually a couple other states with some smaller ventures. NOWCAP Services is one of those ventures, and NOWCAP Services works to provide opportunities to individuals with disabilities and acquired brain injury in the state of Wyoming. NOWCAP Rock Springs has been open for just a little bit over 11 years, but our main NOWCAP Services office in Casper has been open over 30.
What are some of the organizations you partner with?
You know, we partner with all kinds of agencies throughout the community here in Rock Springs. We work with the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. We work with both School District 1 and School District 2 in providing programs and assistance. We do volunteerism for organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce, Young at Heart Senior Center, the library system. We've also done stuff for the Urban Renewal Agency. Really, I think we've done stuff at the Rock Springs Museum. So all kinds of partnerships, Tom, really is what makes us work. And we really work on, one of our goals now is really to focus what we call being an employment first agency, where we actually make employment a priority for our folks with disabilities. And because of that, we have lots of employment partners throughout the community like Home Depot, Kmart, Chamber of Commerce, Come and Go, just to name a few of the entities that we have people working with for as regular employees.
What are some of the primary services you offer to your folks that you have?
Our primary services, number one, is we offer residential services where we actually work with people in homes that we own and provide folks with 24-hour support and supervision. And really what we give to folks in those homes really come down to what their needs are. Some of the folks we work with, we do more caretaking and more of that care provision piece of the puzzle. But a lot of what we do is teaching to have people become more independent. We also work in what we call supported living, which is where we work with folks in their own apartments or their families' homes to be able to help teach them the skills to become more independent. Another big component of our program is the employment services, where we help people develop job skills to eventually be able to work in an independent situation and be able to have that piece of the puzzle. Recently, we placed a guy at the Loaf and Jug in Green River, and when we were driving home the other day and we were talking about his job, I said, how do you feel? How do you like your job? And he hadn't had a job in years. He actually said, Roy, I feel like I have a place of value. I actually feel like I have a role. And really that employment piece has been huge for us. And it's interesting you ask the questions about services because we're really kind of changing the last service. The last service is day services. And day services traditionally has been folks come to our building and they receive services from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, where we go into the inclusion, we do some employment, we go do things in the community that are recreational based, we work on volunteerism, and then they go home. The federal government was just that oversights us, the Center of Medicaid Services, has put some mandates out and some changes. So we're really rolling with those changes. And that change is actually to have a day have services, those 9 to 3 services, without walls. So most of our services now in the day are actually being done in the community. So folks aren't coming to a center-based approach. And I know this is kind of radical. I've been doing this for 19 to 20 years, Tom. And the crazy thing is, if you would have told me 19, 20 years ago that this is how things would be today, I would say there's no way it would ever work. I just wish we would have figured this out 19 to 20 years ago, because what I'm seeing is, it's like when I was talking to some of the families about this idea, because, they've been in this same system for as long as I have, and some of them longer. They said, well, we don't know. They're so used to going to the day center. And I'm like, well, think about it. Today, one of our guys woke up this morning at 7, came into the building at 9, 10 o'clock went to the rec center, came back to the building at noon, had lunch, At 1:15 that day, he went and got a haircut, then went and did some shopping at Walmart, got back to the building at about 2:40, went home at 3:15, and then hung out at his house, and at 6 o'clock that night went to Village Inn. I said, how many of us actually go to a building or a day hab center after we do our morning or we're doing our leisure stuff? None of us. So why can't his day look like this? He wakes up at 7 in the morning or wakes up when he wants. 10 o'clock, he goes to the rec center. Then he goes home and has lunch at his home. And then he goes from his home out to get his haircut in Walmart. Why do we have to go to the center? Why can't all these services and training happen in the community? And so it's happened. We've seen our volunteerism increase since we've gone to this, and quality of life. And, when you talk about quality of life, you talked about, partnerships. One of our great partnerships has been the Senior Center, the Young at Heart Senior Center. And for years, they've had a painting class, and we've never gone. We've always done that kind of stuff in our own building by ourselves. I have a group of about 4 ladies, all with varying disabilities, that actually have been going to the Senior Center watercolor paint, and they all brought back their first paintings the other day. And it was awesome because they were beautiful and they were great. They were better than anything I could have done. But to know that while they were out there, they were building relationships with people that weren't disabled and getting to build new friends in a fun setting and learn a new skill, that made me realize what we were doing is the right way with these changes.
So a lot of what you're doing is implementing a social structure for these people. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it, Tom. It's really about creating opportunities for people to build new relationships. You and I build new relationships on a daily basis, either it be at church, at work, at home. We have a chance to build relationships. And historically, when you think about it, people with disabilities would go to a center. And yeah, they would go in the community. But I used to say we didn't go in the community as inclusion. We went into the community as hostile takeover. Because sometimes we go to a restaurant and there would be 6 staff and 20 clients. And really, how are you really integrating into the community? So we now go in with 1 staff and 3 or 4 clients. And that way it's more about building those relationships. And I know I went and watched that painting class the other day. And as I was watching that painting class, every one of my clients have built, or the people we work with, have built relationships with people in that painting class. And that's what we're doing, is we're building them new social opportunities.
Giving a more normalized entrance into the community.
Actually letting them feel, just like that guy said about employment, letting him feel like there's a part, that he's a part of something, that he belongs. And that's the awesome thing. And, we've been doing some stuff for volunteerism, URA. We're looking with some different organizations to get some of our guys on their boards of directors and committees that they serve on, because our folks have a lot to offer, no different than you and I. And even I have my own disabilities, even though it may not be labeled. So this is giving them an opportunity to have those same opportunities that everyone else would.
How many folks do you have in the program right now?
Tom, we have about 18 to 25 that we currently serve in some capacity. We've taken a different trend than some of the other organizations in town, and that's I really haven't tried to grow much in the last 2 years. When we first opened in our first 8 years, we had great growth curves. And unfortunately, even with a down economy, employees are hard to find. And one of the struggles we have, to be honest, is Medicaid reimbursement rates aren't the greatest, and they don't allow the greatest salaries. And so I've decided not to have a great growth rate and focus more on quality of employees and quality of services than size of organization.
Can you give us an idea of what the range of disability that your folks have?
We do have some different funding sources, but our primary funding source is the Behavioral Health Division's Department of Developmental Disabilities waiver, and also the Acquired Brain Injury waiver. The major concept is they have to have some kind of intellectual disability, an IQ of less than 70. If not, they can qualify under a recorded brain injury. And if they have a recorded brain injury and they can show an impairment through some testing, that they can be part of the program. But most of who we serve have intellectual disabilities, which is an IQ of less than 70. But with that, you also see we serve a lot of folks with autism, Asperger's, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. We have folks that have concurrent mental illness with depressive disorders, behavioral type disorders. We also have a lot of folks that have a lot of medical issues. We have worked with folks that are nonverbal, some people that have speech difficulties and speech impairments and such like that.
How do these folks get to your program?
The system is when someone with a disability is interested in joining the program, if they're not already on the waiver through the Department of Health, through Medicaid, we have them hook up with the state, and the state will then give them a list of case managers, and the case managers then present them options throughout community to use for services. So we partner with those case managers in looking at new opportunities for persons.
So you're operating on several different levels in terms of, we talked about the social integration, but you're also working as a source of employment, are you not?
Not so much a source of employment. I do have a couple of folks that work for me as part-time jobs doing some janitorial, secretarial stuff, but that's more to build them. Our job is more to help find them the job in the community. There's what they call sheltered workshop systems, or we're an organizational-owned workshop where an organization has a business and the participants work with them. And organizations in the federal government are starting to move away from there because it's not integrated. When I worked at Southwest Wyoming Rehabilitation Center, they had some of those sheltered workshops, and the example I'll give is the thrift shop, which was a great enterprise. But the problem was, except the few staff that were in there, 95% of the employees were disabled. And it kind of goes against this new trend of trying to get people integrated into the community. It is harder to find people integration into jobs sometimes, especially in a down job market. But I'll tell you, when you find someone a job in the community, I recently, Tom, became what's called an ACRE instructor, which is the Association of Community Rehabilitation Educators, which is seen as the foremost expert in disability employment. We're not really trying to find our guys employment. We're trying to find them a career. We're really trying to find the things they like and the things they enjoy and match them with a business to actually find them a job they'd like. And the approach is more business-centered than client-centered. Back in the day when we used to try to find people jobs, I would approach employers and say, hey, I have a great client for you. Now it's different. We'll actually come out and meet with employers, interview the employers, and get to know about their businesses, find out what their needs are, find out if there's certain jobs they have turnover on, or if there's those duties that take 2 to 5 or 2 to 10 hours a month that they're paying overtime for that they can't get through. And then we go back and look at the people we're working with and say, we may have a match to help you out in that little niche area you have. Or one of the guys we just placed at Come and Go had a lot of experience in prep cooking, and he's at the new Come and Go as a prep cook at 20 hours a week. We look at that involvement, and so not only are we out there trying to find the employment, we're actually building relationships with employers. In fact, it's almost like we're becoming an SOS or an Elwood staffing for people with disabilities. It's backwards. I want to get to know employers, and then when we learn their needs, is we have people that might meet their needs, then we go forward and find that great career for our folks with disabilities.
What type of job placements are you typically finding?
The traditional job placements for people with disabilities are what I call the 3 Fs, Tom. Fun, food, and filth. Usually you see people with disabilities being placed in food service jobs, janitorial jobs that involve like fun settings, movie theaters, stuff like that. And that might be a good job for some people. But I have to tell you, when I got out of college and when I to put myself through college, I worked at the Taco John's, and it was probably the most miserable job I'd ever had. It wasn't something I enjoyed the least in my life. And if you talk to a lot of people, there are some people that really like fast food jobs, but there are some people that just say that's the worst job I've ever had in my life. And then what do we typically do? We stick someone with a disability in fast food because it's the easiest job. So we try to get more creative. I have people in those fast food jobs. I have a guy that does prep cooking, prepping for the day and dishwashing at taco time. But I have a lady that works for the Chamber of Commerce that goes in 5 to 10 hours a week and helps put all the inserts into the monthly flyers to help Dave out. She also helps put maps and stuff out for Dave. We have a lady that's worked in the receiving department at Kmart for almost 11 years. And her whole job is the receiving comes in. She's responsible for all the small boxes, makeups, checking them in and out of the building. One of our guys actually works at Loaf and Jug, and he actually is learning to do cash register work, and he helps unload the truck and stocks the shelves. So there's a variance of all kinds of different employment, Tom, that we see. And what we really do is we try to get to know the participant to find out what their skills are, what their needs are, what their wants are. And then from that point, we then try to find the environments that work for them and then find that job that will work for them in that match. And the guy at Loaf and Jug is a great example because he had to have specific environments. He's great at customer service, but he gets overwhelmed around a lot of people. So like Smith's at dinner time or Walmart would probably not be a great fit for him. But the Loaf and Jug allows him to use that customer service skills, but it's a much smaller environment where he's successful and not overwhelmed and overstimulated.
Do you provide training and that type of thing for these people as well?
We actually offer a service called job coaching, where we send in a trained job coach to go in with them, Tom, to be able to teach them how to do that job. It's becoming a growing trend, though, in the country that businesses don't want the job coach. They actually want us just to train them as the employer of how to work with the individual, and then they do the training and job coaching themselves. So we've seen it both ways, but that is an opportunity. And even if once someone's done with the job coach, because the job coach hopefully isn't a long-term piece, that The job coach is available to go back if they have learn new jobs, but we provide constant support. Like the taco time, I call the manager at that taco time every 2 weeks to say, how is my guy doing? Is he doing well? Is there any concerns, any training we need to provide? And at this point, it may be more of at least once, 1 to 2 times a month, just so they know we're there to support them. But because of that, this guy's been at Taco Time for 2.5 years.
How do you identify potential employers in the community?
It really starts with that building of skills. And I use this fancy form, Tom. I call it the IPP, the Individual Placement Plan. And it's this big old grid that has all kinds of skills and needs and wants and desires and strengths, weaknesses, past jobs, those kind of things. And I start to look and say, this is an environment that will be there. So here's an example. We also work with Department of Vocational Rehabilitation and placing people in jobs. And so basically, for example, we were working with a guy that had 25 to 30 years of working for the same oil field company in the oil field as like a driller and all kinds of different hands in the oil field on the rig. He got injured and couldn't work anymore because of his back. So he went to DVR and we had to try to help find him a job. As we were looking through his skills, it became very clear that he really knew the oil field. So we identified this guy can't work on an oil field anymore, but he knows the locations and the sites and the equipment better than anyone. Why don't we approach all of different oil field supply companies and sales companies, places like Night Oil's Tools and those places? That's is where you'll go. So then we identified and started doing interviews with businesses that did oil field sell supplies based upon the fact that we knew that's where that guy would be the most successful, Tom. So it's kind of a process of figuring out where you think people you work with might be successful and then moving that way toward those interviews. And then sometimes you can look at something like a Home Depot. Home Depot has 15 to 25 different types of job opportunities within their building. So maybe interviewing them gets your foot in the door to get to know them, but then you have a business that offers 10 to 15 different opportunities. And sometimes we go meet with a business and we may not even have an individual to pitch to them for months or a year, but at least we've built that relationship. And we've had situations where employers have called us and said, hey, do you have someone that could fit this need?
What is the source of your funding?
Our main source is the Department of Health's Behavioral Health Division, which is the Medicaid waiver. It is a federal state program funded primarily, Tom, but it is mostly regulated by the state, and the state's regulated by the federal government. So that's the majority. We also do have funding from the school district and the Department of Education, doing some projects with them. And we also have funding that we get through Department of Vocational Rehabilitation through projects we do with them.
Walk us through a day in the life of Roy Lloyd as you go about doing your job there.
I actually start my day 5 days a week by picking up anywhere from 1 to 2 of the folks that we work with in Green River and actually being their transportation over to Rock Springs for services that day. In fact, before I came here this morning, and the reason I thought I could be a little bit after 9 was I dropped one of our guys off at work, and my day starts by doing some training and seeing how his job is doing and getting him to work. After that, it's a combination of a lot of hats. I'm an HR guy because I'm responsible for about 30 to 40 staff. Their training, their hiring, their management, their discipline, their accountability. I'm responsible for an employee that's been 11 years with us and hiring and training new employees. I do marketing because part of my job is to kind of promote our company and what we do. I'm kind of a community builder. I guess, I have to go out and build relationships to find opportunities for our clients that might, and those volunteerisms and the different things and employment that we do. I'm an employment guy. I help find people jobs. I'm an accountant because I don't necessarily do the accounting, but I'm responsible for managing a budget. I have to, one of the biggest roles I think I play is I'm a leadership director, developer. I have a small management team, and my job is to teach them to be the best leadership team they can be. I'm a compliance guy because when you look at everything we do, Tom, we actually fall under DFS for adult and child protective service laws. We have nursing board laws we have to follow. We have Department of Health regulations we have to follow. We're oversight by the Centers of Community Medicaid Service. We're oversight by the Commission of Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. Because of our contracts with DVR and education, we have oversight by them. But we're also oversight by the parents and the people we serve because they have things. So I'm a compliance officer. So really, every day is a little bit different, Tom. But at the end of the day, it's an exciting job because I know every challenge I make helps someone's life become a little bit better.
How have you seen the change in the community's view of disabilities?
I think it's become more open. I think there will always be a population that's closed-minded, unfortunately. But I've seen it develop. When we first opened 11 years ago, I approached an employer in town and their HR guy who's not even there with them anymore and said, hey, I have someone that might, want to work, might be able to fit for you for a job. And for 2 years, they had some trepidation and they wouldn't even really consider hiring any of our folks. 3 years later, I got a call. Hey, Roy, we need someone to help. We need to hire someone that can start their job by watering flowers. Do you have anyone that could do that? And over 2 years of working with this gentleman, I would tell you this organization that I'm talking about now, and I'll keep them nameless, is probably to me the premier provider of opportunities for employment for people with disabilities in Sweetwater County. And I'm telling you, 11 years ago, there was some trepidation and some fear about it. So I think you've seen a progressive move toward it. And when we approach places like the Urban Renewal Agency for volunteerism, and I know one of our competitors, Able Hands, has done a really good job. They have a really cool program they're actually doing with the URA this summer. Shout out to them and the URA in helping do the downtown flowers. I'm seeing people become more open, Tom, and it's there's a greater deal of tolerance. I'll tell you, for the most part, our neighborhoods we live in are very supportive, and I think it's a growing positive trend of great support.
Talk a little bit about your staff.
We have about 25 to 35 employees at this point. And most of them are frontline staff that take care of our folks on a hands-on basis. We also have another project, Tom, where we actually we own and manage what we call the Churchill Commons, which is a 20-bedroom HUD apartment complex that has some people with developmental disabilities, but some elderly. We don't even provide a lot of disability services there. We just manage that apartment. So I have someone that coordinates staff for me. I have a full-time maintenance man. I have someone that's job is to do nothing but our school district work. So we have a couple different employment areas, but the majority of my employment are actual people that work with our clients hands-on.
How has technology changed what you do over the past 10
More
years?
so than you would ever imagine. If we were a pioneer, there's this amazing system that's called TheraApp, and it's a web-based system for documentation and implementation and program development that was developed by people that actually work in programs like ours. And about 8 years ago, we started using the TheraApp documentation system and gone away from the paper system. In fact, at this point, 90% of my client files are electronic. 90% of my staffing files are electronic. All my documentation is electronic. I could actually be on business next month out of town, wherever you name it, and I could actually track and see how the company is doing through the daily reports, the schedules, the goals, and all of that stuff through the system we use. We've even gone to a more electronic-based and technologically based HR accounting system for clock in, clock out. I can manage that from any remote computer with the right passwords.
We're talking about intellectual disabilities and so forth, but how much is that due to a birth situation, and how much is like accidents and things that have happened to them?
The majority of our participants with intellectual disabilities were born with it or had something that happened shortly thereafter birth, Tom. And that's pretty common for most intellectual disabilities. It's the acquired brain injury portion of what we do that you see someone have that life change later in life, whether it be through a motorcycle or a car accident or some kind of blunt force trauma to the head or maybe a severe stroke, that then you see that happen and see those disabilities become later in life. And that's more through that brain injury piece. But most of my guys, and that's one of the things that make brain injury therapy difficult, is because they knew a different life. At one time, they may have had a job, they may have been a dad, or they had a career. Now it's different. And they were normal, and now they're not normal. I have a friend that actually, kind of an amazing story. Joe's a teacher in Morgan, Utah, and I grew up in Evanston, and Evanston is actually the home of the Jamaican bobsled team. And Joe went on to play some small college football, but became really enamored with the bobsledding. And actually, around the time that the Olympics were in Salt Lake, so you're talking years ago, Joe had become training for the bobsled team and actually was a backup on the Olympic bobsled team. And the week before the bobsled event, they were having the World Championships, and nobody was sending their Olympic team to the World Championships that year because they didn't want to get their Olympic athletes hurt. So Joe, being the alternate, actually led an Olympic bobsled team in Germany. During the run, Joe lost control of his bobsled and had a crash and had a brain injury. And took a couple of years to be able to walk correctly, physically capacitate correctly, kind of had to do some speech things. And he's, back to normal. But this was a guy that before this injury was an Olympic-style class athlete. and his life changed in mere moments. And that's the difficult part with brain injury, because they knew different. Folks with intellectual disabilities have great coping mechanisms because typically they were born with it and they didn't know it. I remember I work with a lady and she lives independently, and she's higher functioning is what we call, closer to an IQ of 70. More of her, she has some odd behaviors. And I remember her once coming to me and said, I need some equipment to help me with my disability. And I'm thinking to myself, what equipment do you need to help you in your house with your disability? It's, as an intellectual disability, there's not much I could do. She goes, I could really use a step stool because I'm just short and I can't get into my counters. And so a lot of my guys don't see themselves as having individual disabilities because they've had it with their whole life. They just see it that they have different abilities. And there's a great national organization called People First. And the mantra of People First is people first, disability second. And so a lot of my guys have come to cope and learn that they've had that disabilities, and they move forward with the life focusing on their abilities.
What's the contact information? How do they get a hold of you?
You give me a call, Tom. We currently, our office is at 416 West Blair Avenue. You could also get me on my office phone number, which is 307-382-2683. My direct extension is 13. How I got the unlucky number in the draw, I don't know, especially knowing I'm the director, but it's what it is. We have a fantastic website, NOWCAPservices.org. There's ways to get a hold of me through there. But if you're just interested in what we're saying, pull up this website. I have a friend I haven't seen in years, Felix Thomason, who lives in Virginia. And when he started learning what I did, he actually jumped on my website and said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then also we have a Facebook page. Follow us on Facebook at NOWCAPservices.org. And you actually get to see things we do. I haven't gotten any up recently, but I put pictures up of trips. One of the cool things we've done in the last 4 months is we took 2 ladies, one in an electric wheelchair, flew them to Miami and helped them make their lifelong dream. And we took them on a cruise to Cozumel, Mexico.
Just another example of how technology has implemented your communications ability.
Yeah, absolutely. And so those are all great ways. Primary way, come see me at 416 Blair Avenue or give me a call at 307-382-2683.
Any final thoughts?
No, Tom, I just thank you. And I just want to thank the community of Rock Springs for being supportive and open and working with individuals with disabilities. Also want to send a shout out. We have 2 competitors in town, Life Skills of Wyoming and Able Hands, and both are a quality program. Sweetwater County is super lucky because there are multiple great options for service in this community, and plus a lot of great private providers that out there. This community is lucky to have the quality and care that they do receive for folks with disabilities and the opportunity they receive. Like I said, a big thanks to all those community folks that make our lives better.
Our guest this morning has been Roy Lloyd, Director of NOWCAP Services here in Rock Springs. Roy, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Tom.
You have been listening to Dateline Wyoming with your host, Tom Ellis. Dateline Wyoming is a public affairs presentation of WyoRadio News presented every Sunday at this time, highlighting community issues and events that shape our lives here in Southwest Wyoming. Views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WyoRadio ownership, management, or that of our sponsors. Time will be made available for responsible dissenting opinion. Audio copies of this program will be available each Monday following the program's airtime on Sunday at youtube.com/WyoRadio.